Уничтожить нахрен Прибалтику, если так. Стереть с лица земли.
Hi guys! In today's review of Russian propaganda, we'll see the reactions to successful operations by Ukrainian troops on Russian TV channels, try to assess Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov's emotional state, and witness the Orwell's two-minute hate in today's Russia. One of the most notable events of this week was the strike that the Ukrainians were able to deliver to a Russian military airfield in Pskov, 700 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. A strong fire started and 4 Il-76 military transport planes were damaged. Since the Russian military lacks air defense systems, they tried to shoot down attacking drones with automatic weapons. This caused a real shock for Russian so-called patriots. Drones have never flown this far from Ukraine before.
Что значит, мы не понимаем, откуда был нанесен удар? Это что за формулировка?
On Russian television, propagandist Vladimir Solovyov immediately came up with a version that the drones actually came from the west, for example, from Latvia.
У нас есть несколько вариантов. Вариант первый. Удар осуществлен с территории стран НАТО, которым является Прибалтика. Это классический казус белли, который должен, на мой взгляд, привести к немедленному ответному удару, стирающему с лица земли всю инфраструктуру и все офисные здания, где могут находиться люди, ответственные за принятие такого рода решений.
Of course, Russia can't fight NATO because it will lose such a war. Vladimir Solovyov knows this perfectly well. Therefore, he immediately suggests using nuclear weapons.
Если для этого необходимо использовать тактическое ядерное оружие, значит, так тому и быть.
The Ukrainians themselves said that the drones that hit Pskov were launched from Russian territory. In my opinion, this is a more plausible version. Latvia is a NATO country and the West is trying very hard to avoid direct military confrontation between Russia and the alliance. We know that Ukraine is prohibited from attacking Russian territories with Western weapons, so it's difficult to imagine that a NATO country would provide its territory for an attack on Russia. Solovyov also admits the version of launching drones from Russia, and this is the most inconvenient for him because in this case it's unclear whom to hit with a nuclear bomb.
Третье. Если действуют диверсионно-разведывательные группы, тогда вопрос, что необходимо сделать, чтобы у наших доблестных представителей правоохранительных структур были все необходимые силы, средства и полномочия, чтобы эффективно бороться.
In fact, there is no answer to this question, because the problem here is not a decisions or political will. It's just that Russia doesn't have enough resources, troops, border guards, police officers, to control its vast territories and borders. The gigantic size of Russia, which becomes a protection for the country during an enemy attack, begins to interfere when Russia itself became an aggressor. There is nothing that can be done about it, and this is a question for Vladimir Putin. When he made the decision to attack Ukraine, he didn't calculate the consequences and didn't understand the difficult situation that Russia would be enduring a prolonged conflict. However, propagandist Vladimir Solovyov tries to encourage his viewers and assure them that if the entire people are mobilized, it will be possible to defeat the saboteurs.
Может быть, пора нашему народу переходить из категории «Ой, тут смотрите, интересно по телевизору показывают» в стадию активного содействия органам, активной борьбы с шпионами, возродить СМЕРШ на современном техническом уровне, и диверсанты должны быть уничтожены.
This is Solovyov's favorite idea. Revive SMERSH. It's the name of Soviet counterintelligence agencies during the Second World War. Vladimir Solovyov suggests it about once a week, and he sees himself as its leader. But so far, fortunately, his power doesn't extend beyond the television studio. By the way, Vladimir Solovyov appears in 2 images on Russian television. They're similar, but as a propaganda reviewer, I see differences. Solovyov version 1 is the one who appears on the major channel Russia 1. He has a wider audience, and although he adheres to a tough line and threatens the world with nuclear bombs, he still doesn't go beyond the strict television style. Solovyov version 2 is a propagandist who appears on his own channel Solovyov Live. This is a channel for more radical and militant viewers, and their Solovyov is in a different image, more relaxed, rude and aggressive character, apparently reflecting the target audience. Here's what he said on the same topic.
Массовая атака беспилотников по объектам России. Псков — это вообще что такое?
And check out this wonderful sports suit with the inscription USSR. Apparently this should touch the strings of the Solovyov audience soul. These are aged people who are saddened by the collapse of the Soviet Union, full of resentment and embittered against the world.
Псков — это же рядом граница НАТО. Откуда был запуск? С Украины, что ли? Ага, сейчас.
However, the conclusions for Solovyov in this image are roughly the same.
С территории Прибалтики уничтожить нахрен Прибалтику, если так. Стереть с лица земли.
And the final conclusion is also unchanged.
Наконец, воссоздайте СМЕРШ.
I wonder what percentage of the audience really likes this. I think that most people in Russia care more about having good hospitals and schools, smooth roads, quality goods and rising incomes. And this war arranged by Putin prevents them from living a normal life. But propagandists deliberately shout as loud as possible to suppress these thoughts in citizens. So far, it works. Russian propagandists and politicians are proposing to use nuclear weapons not only in the European Union, but also in Ukraine. In particular, State Duma deputy Andrei Gurylev suggests using tactical nuclear weapons under the village of Rabotina, where fierce fighting is taking place.
Я уж больше скажу, под Работино сейчас 4 выстрела со 152-го орудия, и на этом, в принципе, можно там тему забыть. Спокойно немножко подождать, чтобы ветром сдуло, зайти, собрать всю технику, которая осталась, и идти дальше. Вот и все. В нормальном тактическом ядерном снаряжении.
Vladimir Solovyov fully agrees with this.
То есть вот реально сейчас Работино идеальное, просто идеальное место для применения тактического ядерного оружия.
Идеально. И они там все в кучу собрались. Идеальное просто. И на этом наступательная группировка накрылась медным тазом.
I would like to remind you that the Russian authorities have declared the Zaporizhia region their own. Rabotina is a settlement in the Zaporizhia region. Therefore, from the point of view of Russian propaganda, Russia should strike its own territory with nuclear weapons and wait for the radioactive cloud to blow somewhere. But where will it blow, by the way? Maybe to ordinary Russian regions. However, from the point of view of the whole world, this will be a nuclear strike on another country. And this is a direct step towards unleashing a nuclear war which could end in a catastrophe for the whole world and especially for Russia. I hope that Vladimir Solovyov's viewers understand this. Vladimir Solovyov can be watched not only on TV. In the Russian company Sima Land, whose office is located in the city of Yekaterinburg, Solovyov's speeches are shown to employees on a large screen.
Эта война во многом гражданская, потому что русский народ самый разделенный народ в мире. Мы были подготовлены для уничтожения. Почему я говорю резко и жестко? Потому что пока мы не осознаем, что никто с нами не собирается договариваться. Мы никому в этом мире не нужны, кроме нас самих.
This is a classic 2-minute hate, just like in Orwell's novel 1984. Honestly, it looks scary, but it should be said that Sima Land is known for its pro-Kremlin actions, and its employees are generally used to this. I hope these young people have enough mental reserves to resist such brainwashing internally. We haven't seen another Kremlin propagandist, Dmitry Kiselyov, for a long time. It seems he was on vacation, and now he's back and has started pouring more dirt on Ukraine. His main thesis is that Ukraine had everything it needed for development in 1991, but its authorities missed the opportunity.
Стартовые условия у Украины были лучше, чем у любой из 15 республик бывшего СССР. Пожалуй, даже лучше, чем у России.
And then he lists for a long time what Ukraine has, such as black soil and developed industry and transport infrastructure.
Все это в очень короткий исторический срок экспериментальное государство под названием Украина разбазарило.
And now everything is bad in Ukraine. High public debt, ineffective government and total dependence on America.
Хозяйство деградировало, коррупция бушует, режим выродился в нацистский, народ ввергнут в войну.
Well, how could he say such things, that people will be plunged into war? It was Vladimir Putin who started the war on February 24, 2022. Let's not forget about it. No one but Putin plunged Ukraine into war. As for its economic and other difficulties, they certainly exist, but firstly, they exist in Russia as well. If it weren't for oil and gas, it's still a question of who would have developed more successfully. Secondly, Ukraine was developing quite well. GDP in terms of purchasing power parity from 2000 to 2020 increased by about 3 times, despite the loss of Donbas region. And thirdly, what is most important, what business does Russia have with the economic or other difficulties of Ukraine? This is an independent sovereign country that lives as it wants, chooses the power it wants and is responsible for all its problems. And Russians would be better off having the opportunity to ask questions of their own government. If we assume that less economically developed countries should be subordinate to more developed ones, then Russia has long been subject to either the United States or China. However, it has already been subordinated to China. And I can help but notice that Dmitry Kiselyov himself worked in Ukraine in 2000s, and he liked this country very much back then, and now he has seen the light and understands everything. That's what happens when you work as a propagandist. And another star of Russian propaganda, Margarita Simonyan. The more bloody battles are taking place in Ukraine, the more she glows, and her outfits become more revealing.
Они же готовят контрнаступление. Мы готовимся к подготовке их контрнаступления.
In this speech by Margarita Simonyan, her explanation of why Russia is not fighting as well as Ukraine surprised me. It turns out that everything is because Putin loves Russian soldiers very much and protects them.
Так вот, для нашего начальника, люди, которые там, наши бойцы, это его сограждане, которых он любит, ценит и жалеет. Поэтому мы не будем идти ни в какое наступление любой ценой.
That is, Vladimir Putin started a war against Ukraine, in which, according to independent researchers, at least 50,000 Russian men have already died. Tens of thousands more have been injured. Families have lost their breadwinners, and the fate of millions of people has been broken. Apparently, Putin did all this out of special love for his fellow citizens. And Ukraine, which is defending its territory and trying to regain its seized lands, doesn't love its citizens. Amazing logic. The strangest video I watched this week was an 11-minute speech by leader of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, about the sanctions imposed on his mother. What surprised me was not the content, but the form. Kadyrov can barely speak and looks as if it's hard for him to get up from the couch.
Я знаю, что у американских дипломатов, руководства нет чести, совести, достоинства, после того, как они включили санкцию, мою лошадь зазодом.
To spare you from this spectacle, I'll summarize briefly. Kadyrov's horse and plane were sanctioned, and he denies having the latter. But what upset the Chechen leader the most was his mother being sanctioned, and he claims she is at home and not engaged in any activity.
Мою маму, говорят, включили санкцию. Она только бедным, малоимущим, остонуждающим помогает. А за что ее под санкции ввели, против нее ввели санкции? Что вы за народ?
I assume Kadyrov's mother was sanctioned because he was trying to avoid sanctions with her help. She's the president of the Ahmad Kadyrov Foundation, which serves as Kadyrov's cash register, so it's not surprising that she's also under sanctions. Kadyrov promised to retaliate by destroying European countries.
Мы уничтожим, Дон, тех шайтанов, которые, Дон, сегодня существуют на территории, Дон, на, так скажем, за ленточкой, Дон, и последующим, Дон, те страны европейцы, которые поддакивают, Дон, американцам.
And he threatened American diplomats in Europe.
Уверяю вас, Дон, что вам это мало не покажется, Дон. На территории европейских, Дон, российских, вот этих странах, вот ваши американские дипломаты, Дон, не будут ездить, Дон.
So I think the United States Department of State will assess these threats. Kadyrov has some agents in Europe who sometimes stage actions against his enemies abroad. I find it hard to imagine that these people attacking American diplomats or European officials. But this could be another way for Russia to pressure the West by intimidating its representatives through the crazy Kadyrov. And finally, let's enjoy the speech of the candidate for deputy Igor Zuev in the Irkutsk region of Russia. The Ukrainian war veteran, speaking to citizens, commented on the death of Evgeny Prigozhin.
То, что произошло 24 числа, гибели ваших командиров, все участники СВО восприняли, мы просто обозлились все. То, что сейчас укропы ликуют, они, отмоются кровью. Я хочу сказать то, что все, кто здесь присутствует, ребята, которые, вся армия наша, поддерживает вас. Мы знаем, что вы сделали, Вагнера. Я выражаться не буду с вами, я скажу прямо. И поэтому, ребята, добьем этого врага в их логово и погоним натовцев, которые не там воюют против нас. Били и будем бить. И почтим память тех ребят, которые погибли, Вагнера и погибли, Евгений Пригожин, который является для нас всех первым полководцем специальной военной операции, войны с Украиной, Россией.
Of course, many thoughts arise here. Firstly, in my videos I often talk about Prigozhin supporters who exist in Russian society and the army, and this was one of them. And it's even interesting who he blames for Prigozhin's death and how this idea lives in his head. Secondly, interesting people are now entering power in Russia. This is also one of the consequences of the war. Such veterans will now become deputies. In general, it's a natural result of the degradation of political life in Russia in recent years, but it's still somehow offensive. In conclusion, I want to say that you shouldn't evaluate what's happening in Russia solely through the prism of these videos. I deliberately choose the wildest ones for the review. There are still many people in Russia who disagree with the war and Putin's regime. Their voices are weakly heard due to censorship and repression, but they exist. That's all for today. Take care.